Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're jumping straight into something, well, really fundamental for getting anything big done: successful project planning.
Absolutely. Whether you're talking massive infrastructure, like the example we'll use, or, a complex initiative in your own work, these principles are key.
We've gathered your source materials on this, and our mission today is really to unpack the core parts of a good project plan.
Yeah, we want to pull out the most important takeaways, help you make sense of it all so you can quickly grasp what actually makes projects work according to these sources.
And the sources give us a neat starting definition. A project is basically a sequence of tasks, right? All linked together.
To deliver some kind of pre-agreed outcome. Sounds simple, but making that happen needs structure.
That's where the plan comes in. It's the communication tool, isn't it?
Exactly. It tells everyone how those outcomes are going to be delivered. And it needs enough detail, so all the stakeholders are clear. And to make this feel, less abstract, we're going to keep coming back to a case study from your sources. It's the Badel Construction Road Scheme.
A big one. Perfect for illustrating these points.
Okay, so let's dive in. Your sources lay out, 9 essential elements for a successful plan?
9 key areas. Let's unpack them.
First up, and the sources really hammer this home, scope. You have to start here.
You really do. Scope is all about defining the edges, the boundaries. What is this project actually doing?
And crucially, what is it not doing?
Precisely. Nailing down what's included and what's excluded. Your source basically says, look, without scope, you don't really have a project.
Getting it clear avoids so many problems later, right? Like the scope creep, the budget running away.
Reduces risk, prevents confusion, manages what people expect to get at the end. It's foundational.
So for that Badel Road Scheme example, what was the scope?
The big picture scope was ambitious. Transform the eastern region's economy.
Wow, okay.
Specifically, by building a motorway between Gamville and Lake Ida. The key performance metric, if you like, was cutting journey time through the Isnardi Mountains by nearly half.
Right, so that's the core purpose the whole plan hangs on, often comes from the business case, yeah.
Exactly. The justification for doing it in the first place.
Okay, so once you know what you're building, what's next?
Well, then you need to figure out when, which brings us to the schedule.
The timeline makes sense.
Yeah. This tells everyone involved how long the whole thing should take, when they can expect delivery. And for the manager, it's their day-to-day tool for tracking progress.
And how do you build that? The sources mention breaking it down.
Right. You take a whole project, chop it into manageable tasks, often called a work breakdown structure, or WBS.
And then assign dates to each bit.
Assign start and end dates. And you often see this shown visually, like in a Gantt chart, those bar charts mapping tasks over time.
The sources also mention different types of tasks, like consecutive versus concurrent.
Yeah, that's important. Consecutive means task A must finish before task B can start. Concurrent means they can happen at the same time or overlap.
Understanding those links, those dependencies, that's critical.
Absolutely, because that's how you find the critical path.
The sequence of tasks that dictates the earliest you can possibly finish.
Exactly. If anything on that path slips, the whole project finish date slips, unless you can make up time elsewhere.
So for Badel, how long was the schedule?
The plan set out a 20-month duration overall, starting May 20x2, aiming to finish December 20x5. So that's the big time box.
And it broke them down?
Into 4 main stages, yeah. Stage 1, Gamville to Omicon, May x2 to April x3.
Okay.
Stage 2, Omicon and Nuhasa, started a bit before Stage 1, finished February x3, running to April x4, some overlap there.
Right. Concurrency.
Then Stage 3, Nuhasa to Zeta Town, again overlapping slightly, Feb x4 to Feb x5.
And the final leg?
Stage 4, Zeta Town to late Ada. That kicked off March x5 and ran to the finish line in December 20 x5.
Okay, so you've got the what and the when. Time is money, as they say.
Inevitably. Which leads us straight to budgets.
The financial plan.
Pretty much. The plan expressed in monetary terms. It's how you assign the financial resources needed for all those tasks on the schedule.
And the sources note a strong link here, right? Schedule slips.
Budget probably takes a hit, yeah. Delays almost always cost money.
But it's not just tied to schedule. The budget is its own crucial constraint.
It dictates how much you can spend, when you can draw down funds.
Right. And the total budget is usually a hard limit. Your source is clear. If you need more money, you can't just magic it up.
There's a process. Costing, justification, getting the sponsor to sign off.
Definitely. Not something you do lightly.
So Badel's budget was huge, I imagine.
$19 billion. Total planned cost.
Wow. And that was allocated.
Yes, split across the stages based on the work involved. Stage 1 was $4.7 billion, Stage 2, $5.5 billion, Stage 3, $5.2 billion, and Stage 4, $3.6 billion.
You can see how a delay or a scope change in, say, Stage 2 could really blow that $5.5 billion figure.
Instantly puts pressure on it, exactly. Okay, moving beyond the hard numbers of time and money, what about expectations? What people want from the project?
Good point. That brings us to requirements.
This isn't just the technical spec, is it?
No, it's broader. It's about stakeholder expectations. And your source makes a really interesting point. Correct. These aren't always written down formally.
But the project manager still needs to understand them.
Absolutely. The plan is where you try to capture these, quantify them if possible, and figure out how they translate into resources or specific tasks.
How did this play out in the Betel example? There was that big economic goal.
Right. The government's requirement was that the road should give a big boost to our country's economy.
Which, as the source points out, is quite aspirational, isn't it? Hard to measure directly from building a road.
It is. It's more of a strategic objective, the ultimate why, from the funder's perspective. It's not like an engineering spec for concrete strength.
But the project manager needs to keep it in mind.
Definitely. It shapes the context, influences decisions, even if it's not a direct task deliverable. It's the so what behind the project.
And expectations also relate to how well things need to be done, right?
Exactly. Which leads nicely into quality criteria.
The standards the project has to meet.
Precisely. Quality control is vital. You need to make sure what you're delivering actually meets the agreed specifications.
So the plan needs to include how you'll ensure that, methods, processes.
Yes. Inspections, checks, procedures, whatever's needed to make sure quality standards are hit consistently.
For Betel, the source mentioned low price was a factor in choosing the contractor.
It was. But other quality factors were just as, if not more, important. Things like efficiency.
Keeping disruption down with a tight timetable.
And crucially, building it exactly to specification. You can't compromise on safety and reliability for a major motorway. That's paramount.
Okay, so we've got the what, when, how much, why, and how well now. What about the actual stuff needed to do the work?
Ah, yes. Project resources.
People, materials, equipment.
That's it. The workforce, the physical stuff you need, the machinery. And your source rightly says planning and coordinating these is often where the real complexity lies for a project manager.
I can imagine. If you don't have the right digger or enough concrete or the skilled team on site when the schedule says,
everything grinds to a halt, especially if it's a task on that critical path we talked about. Delays pile up fast.
So the planning involves assigning specific resources to specific tasks.
Yes. And because resources cost money, well, often a lot of money, the source points out you need to agree and approve resource levels before you finalize the budget.
Because the resources fundamentally drive the costs.
Exactly. For Betel, they apparently costed it by looking at major components, how many tunnels, bridges, kilometers of road surface.
Which then lets you figure out how much steel, concrete, asphalt, how many engineers, how many construction crews you need.
And plan to have them available exactly when each stage requires them. That coordination is key.
Okay. And all this planning, all this effort, who actually cares about it? Besides the project team, I mean.
Good question. That brings us to the stakeholders.
Anyone with an interest, basically.
Anyone with an interest in the project's success or failure. The plan needs to identify who the key ones are.
And not just list them, but analyze them. Their interests, their influence.
Yes. Understand what they care about, how much power they have to affect the project. Your source breaks them down into typical groups.
Like the project sponsor.
Always key. They kick it off, approve the plan, hold the purse strings, and ultimately receive the finished product. The project manager reports to them.
Then the project team doing the work.
Who needs managing, clear direction, support. And then there are the external stakeholders.
Right. For Betel, who were they?
The government minister, obviously, as the sponsor, but also potentially shareholders, if private firms were involved. Very importantly, local villagers whose lives were disrupted by the construction.
And even wildlife, the source mentions. Environmental impact.
Yes, and this is where it gets really complex, because these stakeholders often have competing demands, don't they?
Like wanting it built fast and cheap, but also wanting minimal environmental damage.
Exactly. Your source points this out, trying to juggle these competing interests. Like the contractor being expected to limit its environmental footprint while also delivering on time and budget can lead to expensive changes during the project. Managing stakeholders is a constant balancing act.
With all these different people and potentially conflicting interests, clear communication must be absolutely vital.
Couldn't be more critical, which is why the communications plan is next on the list.
This isn't just sending out random emails, is it?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
It's a structured plan detailing what information each stakeholder group needs, when they get it, and how it's delivered: email, report, meeting, etc.
And it has to be tailored.
Absolutely. Different stakeholders need different things. The middle source gives good examples.
Like the sponsor needs.
High-level stuff. Updates on major issues, how they're being fixed, budget status, schedule status, the big picture accountability points.
Whereas the project team needs the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. Technical details, quality specs for their specific tasks so they can actually do the job properly.
And those external groups, like the villagers.
They need to know how their concerns are being heard and addressed. How is the project mitigating noise or traffic disruption or environmental impact? It's about managing their specific issues.
Makes sense. Okay, we're nearing the end of the list. A good plan looks ahead, but it also has to consider, well, what if things go wrong?
Precisely. The ninth element, risk management.
Because every project has risks, things might not turn out as planned.
Always.
Yeah.
There are risks to the project objectives, like will the better road actually boost the economy in the end? And then there are implementation risks, things that could derail the building process itself.
Like supply chain problems, accidents on site.
Exactly. So the source outlines the standard process here. First step, risk identification.
Brainstorming everything that could possibly go wrong and impact success.
Then second, risk analysis. This is crucial. Looking at each identified risk and figuring out its probability, how likely is it to happen? And its severity or impact, how bad would it be if it did happen?
Okay, probability times impact gives you a sense of scale. Then what?
Third, risk prioritization. You can't tackle everything. Use the analysis to rank the risks and focus on the most significant ones.
Focus your effort where it matters most.
And fourth, risk response plans. For those high priority risks, you need concrete actions planned in advance to either prevent them, reduce their likelihood or impact, or have a contingency ready if they do occur.
So how did Biddle do on this front, according to the source?
Well, here's where the example is really telling. They did identify key risk areas: health and safety, supply chain issues, environmental concerns. That's step one, done.
Okay, good start. But,
and the source highlights this as a major flaw, they didn't analyze those risks. They didn't assess probability or severity.
so they couldn't prioritize.
Exactly. Because they skipped the analysis, they were basically incapable of knowing which risks were the biggest threats and where to focus their mitigation efforts effectively.
Even though they listed some general control measures like training or safety checks.
Right. They had a list of risks and a list of controls, but no connection between them based on analysis and priority. It means you might spend resources on managing a minor risk while ignoring a potentially catastrophic one.
That's a huge takeaway. Just listing risks isn't enough. The analysis and prioritization are where the real value of risk management lies.
Absolutely. It moves from just awareness to actual proactive management.
Okay, so we've covered all 9 elements: scope, schedule, budget, requirements, quality, resources, stakeholders, communications, and risk management. When you bring all that together, what's the ultimate purpose of this detailed plan?
Your source sums it up well. Once this comprehensive plan is approved, it becomes the project manager's mandate, their authority. It's a single holistic tool they use to navigate all those complex, interconnected parts of the project.
It's the roadmap, the guide, the baseline against which progress is measured.
Keeps everything aligned, aiming for that end goal, finishing on time within budget, meeting the quality standards, and delivering what was required.
So wrapping this up, the real value here is that a plan covering these 9 areas isn't just bureaucracy.
It's the foundation for success. It's how you tackle the complexity and uncertainty that comes with any significant undertaking.
And for you listening, understanding these elements, even if you're not the project manager, gives you a powerful lens.
Yeah, helps you know what questions to ask, what to look for in a plan, where potential problems might be lurking, whether the project is huge, like Betel, or something smaller in your world.
And reflecting on that Betel risk management issue, identifying risks but not analyzing them. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It raises a critical question for anyone involved in projects. Is just having a document called a project plan enough?
Or does the quality of that plan, its thoroughness in covering all these elements properly, especially things like risk analysis, truly determine if you're setting the project up for success or just ticking a box?
What do you think about that distinction? Something to ponder.
We'll keep digging into fascinating topics like this in future deep dives.
Looking forward to it.